Hi everyone! I know that a lot of you guys are playing Diablo 3 primarily solo, and I have done similar things in the past. In some seasons I have done a full solo season. I have done like some seasons where I was just like farming for a lot, solo at least, and this is nothing really surprising. Diablo 3 is an ARPG, and the ARPG genre in general has a lot more potential for solo experience than it has for like a group environment, I would say, aside from maybe some exceptions. And Diablo 3 has the issue that, well, there's one thing that is king, and that's experience farming. And experience farming is primarily done in groups, and you have to get a very high paragon level if you want to be very competitive towards the top end of the leaderboards. And doing that is also much more easy than it is in solo, because in solo you have to do everything yourself, rely only on one person to do the run. You don't have supports to give you insane amount of damage and toughness. You don't have easy protection for your Squirt's necklace, and all these kind of things that are very important for the solo efficiency. In terms of like the overall numbers that they can achieve, in Diablo 3 it's actually still kind of close. Very high end, very strong and skilled solo players can reach around a third up to maybe a half of the XP per hour values of high-end 4-man parties. But obviously in the long run that will still lead to a significant disadvantage in terms of paragons gained, to the point where you will be at least 1, 2, 3 tiers weaker than someone with a similar time investment trying to push at a similar level. Not only that, but there's also some other small advantages, like you can get very easy access to level 150 legendary gems, which makes a rather small difference, because if you play some high-end solo build, you're gonna get to like 140 at least, but you know, those last 10 levels will be a super long grind for you in solo. So obviously this is not really happening, and depending on the class you chose, this is also maybe a bit lower even. Again, compared to groups, it's much more difficult to get your gems that high, even though the advantage is rather small. We're talking about like half a tier or so maybe. But it is there, and this is another of those factors that contributes towards groups just being overall easier, overall more efficient. And this is definitely something that will make solo-only players very frustrated. SSF is actually a topic that I discuss quite frequently on stream, because of those people I know or that come to my stream and talk about it. I know that there are some very successful players as well, so there are definitely some examples in the game of, you know, people just going all in on solo and actually performing really well here. For example, Stu Insane, who's you know, really high up here on the bar rankings, and there are other people like this that appear from time to time. But obviously the potential is lower, and it requires a lot more skill to achieve that. Now, Blizzard is a game company that primarily makes social games. So we have MMOs, we have Overwatch as a team game, and also Diablo 3 is no exception. You can clearly see that you are supposed to play together, but a lot of people don't, simply because of how they play the game, because they want to be solo, because they want to feel the progression and maybe the difficulty, and because also they might not have many people to play with in the first place. And obviously it is a problem that the gaps are so large, but it is also a problem that you cannot really have a kind of dedicated solo game mode that a lot of people have been asking for. I don't think we will ever gonna see like a true dedicated game mode similar to what, for example, PoE has. So when you go to Path of Exile, you have the option to create a solo self-found character when you make one, and this is essentially like another checkmark you have here, and it completely removes all the trading, all the grouping, everything from the game, but otherwise the game is completely unchanged for you. Now in Path of Exile this makes a much bigger difference, because this game is designed around trading. You are not supposed to be able to find everything that you want. Loot acquisition is much slower and all these kind of things, while Diablo 3 is already very heavily tailored towards a solo experience, because you have smart loot. 85% of the items that drop are for your class, and only a small portion is for other classes with other stats. And also the grinding potential is quite low in Diablo 3 compared to Path of Exile in terms of items. So you eventually just find all the gear that you want, and you are capped by the GR 150 limit that effectively makes it so that you have this endpoint inside in Diablo 3 at all times, which doesn't really exist so much in the PoE as well. And a lot of builds, a lot of classes can actually get extremely close to solo GR 150 if you go for it. And some builds can actually go extremely close or even reach that 150 solo cap, even as a completely solo player, if you actually invest the time for it and you are skilled enough. Now, I believe that making something like a dedicated mode or like a separation of characters is probably going to be very difficult to implement at this point in Diablo 3. It is, you know, set in stone pretty much, and just making a whole new kind of like seasonal mode that splits is probably a lot of work, I imagine. And the way it works in Path of Exile actually has a pretty good system. You can make a soul self on character, but you can at all times go back to a regular character and group up with people again, but you can't go back to solo again. Because opening up this grouping and trading would make the game much easier suddenly, and then obviously it doesn't make sense that you can revert that. And I think something similar could be done in Diablo 3 as well, without necessarily making a dedicated game mode for it. When you make a new character in Diablo 3, you also have the option to go hardcore or seasonal or combine the two. You have these check marks here. And you could also implement a new checkmark here that would not necessarily lead to another game mode, but kind of gives the character a flag for the solo only. The thing is that this is a bit different from the regular checkmarks of hardcore and seasonal, because this needs to be something that has to be disabled at a later point if you choose to do so, and it has to count for all of your future characters that you make until the point where you might want to disable it. The best part about this though is that we already have a really good way in the game to track if someone is actually playing solo or not. And that is with a certain achievement that exists on non-season, which is this cooperative achievement, Heroes of the Ages, which you get automatically whenever you first invite someone in your game. Now the issue is that this achievement and this whole category of cooperative doesn't exist for your seasonal achievements. But I think this is something that could easily be copied to the seasonal experience, and that could be kind of like the trigger that would disable your solo only tag for your account for that season and kind of like allow you to group up with people again. Now, what's the advantage of all this solo only, and why are people so serious about it? And well, it comes down to the leaderboards. There are a lot of people that take a lot of pride in their achievement in playing solo and getting to a certain rank. And it goes so far that people have actually started making like SSF leaderboards with like Google Docs, kind of like having a community-driven approach to SSF and rank people by their achievements based on only solo play. But obviously this was outside of the game. This was not really something really big because not a lot of people contributed or participated. But it was there, and this has been going for many seasons already, and as far as I know, this actually keeps going every single season. There's like some SSF community driven leaderboard, and yeah, some people like to participate. Or there's some people that do like the first month of the season completely solo, get their clear done, and then they decide, okay, now it's open, now let's group up with people again. And then they still get their prestigious rank on that SSF leaderboard, and they can still go for the regular leaderboards too. If you implement something like this in the game, I think the best way would be to make this described checkmark when you make a new character, and give you like a big warning or some big like accept button or something whenever you want to invite someone to your party for the first time and break this solo only tag for the rest of the season. So people need to be aware that this would happen. Obviously the same needs to apply when you make a public game or when you request to invite. So all these kind of like different situations where people might join your game or you might join another game. And this would make it so that you don't have to make a separate like seasonal mode that is similar to this SSF mode in Path of Exile. Instead, you could just have this kind of tag for the whole character or for the whole account. And the condition is that as long as you don't have this achievement in that current season, you will be tagged as solo. And then you could have some kind of solo checkmark here on the leaderboards, which would actually perfectly fit right under the seasonal selection. And you can kind of filter by solo players only. I think something like this would be a very interesting solution, and it would allow people to take pride in their ranks, and they still get ranked on the regular leaderboard. So you still end up at, like, let's say, you know, number 5 or something, but you might be the highest person who has not grouped ever in that season on that leaderboard, and then you press on the solo only, and it would kind of list them similar to how it lists, for example, your friends with, you know, a certain filter. Usually I'm quite against adding a lot more filters to leaderboards. There's very often the topic of Paragon filters. So you have, you know, certain brackets of like Paragon 1K, Paragon 2K, Paragon 5K, whatever. I believe that was kind of like split up the leaderboards too much. Right now we already have the issue that especially a lot of the set leaderboards that have been introduced are not pushed very much. Some of them are not even filled to 1000. And if you also add more filters to those leaderboards, you would kind of like split up the player base even more, and everyone is kind of like rank 1 in their street. So I think this is a pretty bad idea, but something like the solo only filter would be a pretty good solution here, I believe, to give people the option to stay on their solo rank or just move on from there and eventually maybe get another higher clear. I don't think that anyone should be ranked twice on the leaderboard. It doesn't make much sense. So you have the option to kind of like keep your solo only rank, and as long as that rank was done while you were still in the solo only mode, then it would stay in the leaderboard and would stay in the filter. But if you override it at a later point, obviously it's gone. So I think that would be the best solution here. So to sum it up, a solo only mode would be amazing for Diablo 3. A lot of people do that already by nature, and maybe they sometimes grew up into 16 or for bounties and these kind of things, and obviously they would have to avoid that then. So we could have a new solo only check mark when you create your character that would count for all the future characters of that season until the point where you decide you want to remove the tag from your character, from your account for that season, and you can freely group up with anyone, but you cannot be ranked on the solo only leaderboard anymore, which should have some kind of like check mark or something, not its own entire leaderboard, but some filter that is, you know, just for that top 1K of whatever set you're looking at, and that would show you all the other people that have done the same. We do have the means in the game to check if someone has been playing solo or not, but unfortunately this only works for non-season. So if this Heroes of the Ages achievement would become a seasonal achievement, this would be kind of like the, you know, behind the scenes check for the game to see if someone has grouped up or not, and that could automatically remove that solo only tag for the rest of the season. Making a dedicated game mode that is completely separate, I guess, is very difficult to implement, but something like this might be in the range of things that first of all is doable and also maybe Blizzard would accept, and I believe it would definitely bring a lot of hype to the game. A lot of people would be very excited about this solo only competition. Myself included, if that would ever come to the game, I would just blast maybe even all seasons from that point on, completely solo. And perhaps there's going to be some other solo improvements similar to what we have seen with the followers. So there might be some bounty updates, for example, so that you can actually farm bounties in solo. There might be some other buffs to solo play that would just make it overall a bit more rewarding, a bit closer to like the high-end foreman meta, a bit easier to level your gems or similar things. But in general, if you choose to go down the solo route, then you're also competing with people on the same playing field. So everyone has the same issues that you have, and that is really the biggest advantage here. So those are my 2 cents about a solo only mode, and let's see if this would ever happen in the future. I'd be very excited for this. So hope you liked my ideas, and let me know what you feel about this, if you would be hyped for this, if you have some other ideas of how to implement this, or perhaps even how to change the game when you're solo only in some way. So hope you like this video, and I'll see you guys next time.